Hi, this is Sean. Welcome to the part of the course in Module 5 where we're first going to look at examples using a program called R and a front end to it called RStudio. This is how learning analytics researchers in many organizations and many learning analytics practitioners begin to look at the kinds of network analysis on a practical level that we've been talking about so far in this module. So I'm going to give you in this GitHub project, which there's a link for you to follow inside of Canvas, so you don't need to see the screen that I'm showing you right now, but you should know that it's out there under the Art of Big Social Data repository on GitHub, which is a repository organization that I run for a lot of my research. And you have the option to download the zip file from here as well. It's directly linked inside of the Canvas environment, as I noted before. This video assumes that you've already gone through the work of defining R and RStudio, or installing R and RStudio in your environment, such that if you were to go to the zip file and unzip it, you would see a project called learninganalytics.rproj, and you would double click on it, and it would open up inside this environment. And in there, you would see a bunch of files provided. And the first file that you would probably look at is README, which tells you to install R and RStudio, and then gives you a number of other instructions. For example, the first thing that you want to do is run setuplibraries.r. This is going to install all of the libraries that you need in order to run the scripts that I've provided you. Once you've done that, there's a initial introduction script to different network analytic concepts provided that's called github-3b.r. Now this is from a work and learning environment on GitHub where I compare a couple of different GitHub projects. And the interesting thing about this example is that it gives you two data sets that you can compare output from. And a lot of times when you're trying to compare organizations or classes, it's useful to be able to look at them together. And so the advantage of this GitHub example is it gives you two examples of organizations or groups at the class level that you can compare. So a lot of what we've been talking about up until now is at the individual level, how to compare individuals and small groups, and this gives you a way of, or an example for, comparing organizations. One of the really great things about learning by a worked example, which is what is provided here, is that you can take a look at the data files that I provide you and see how they're structured, and then create your own data files from your own data structured the same way and run these scripts against your data to see how the outputs from a system that you might have control or access to differ from the environments that we're looking at in the example. So it's not just here's something that works that comes out of the Easy Bake Oven, it's also something that you can use yourself in your own work and examples. And so the GitHub example is the first one that you run. And when you run that one, you'll see that it produces a set of outputs. And these outputs give you different views, and you can see that they're prefixed by Project A, Project B, so that you can compare the same subsequent naming, so Project A edge list nameline and Project B edge list nameline give you, for example, these two projects side by side with total network centralization at the very top. These numbers, you can see the total network centralization on Project A is smaller or less densely packed in the middle than on Project B. And you can also see in the upper right who has the highest in and out degree centrality for each project. These people are likely in leadership positions doing a lot of work in the software projects themselves. Another way you can compare the projects to get a sense of how they're structured, and this corresponds with the different sizes and the centralization measures, as you can see that the decentralized project, Project A, has a lot of different people working in it. And this probably makes sense to you logically, that if you're in a very large organization, the network of people within it is less centralized than when you're in a very small or a much smaller organization like Project B is. So those examples I think you'll find interesting. The second example is from the paper that Dr. Marcela Borge and I did together that I shared with you earlier in the semester, and this will actually produce not only the visualizations in the paper, but also a number of other visualizations that are useful for comparing the performance of different students. And you can see that if you do Control A and run this script, it doesn't work. Why would I show you that? Well, because there's one step that you need to follow when you're running a script in a different subdirectory, and that's in your RStudio, select the More option and set as working directory. What this does is it tells RStudio to look in the directory that you're in for the data that it's running. And so now that I've done this, the data will run. And you can see that it's running because it's putting this output into the window down here for you. And the resulting output will group by 3 different time periods. So in the paper, you'll recall that there are 3 time periods that we segregate the actions of the instructor in. And the graphs that are provided in the paper are the 1, 2. So it's for each time period, the time period being the first part of the file name, and then the 2 being graph 2 are the mid plots that are provided in the paper. And you can see in period 1 that the instructor has a high in degree and high out degree centrality, and that if we go down to period 3 for the same graph, that the instructor is way down here with a lower in degree and out degree centrality. And so this is the argument that we make in the paper, that a properly structured pedagogical online environment creates an opportunity for students over the course of an online course, or in this case a mixed mode online and face-to-face course, provides an opportunity for the instructor to take a less central role. And this example shows you, and then there are a number of other visualizations from this example that you can browse and ask questions about in the discussion board to see how things work. So I encourage you to use the discussion boards to ask questions about things that aren't working, things that are interesting or puzzling to you about the different visualizations that are produced, and we'll get a good discussion going about the actual practice of using these worked examples to do network analysis in an online class environment. So look forward to your questions, both about the style of learning analytics that these examples present, and also about new kinds of development or learning analytics work that we could do together to extend the things that we've talked about into practical technical reality, and also to extend some of the technical examples that are provided to reflect your ideas. So I'll see you online.